Hello, so today's video is all about a perfumer who was trained by the absolute best. So she was trained by Sophia Grossman and she's formulated over the years over 200 fragrances. She's someone who started off initially formulating celebrity fragrances, but then she moved into designer fragrances. She's had some huge hits with designer fragrances over the last few years. And she's also somebody who's had a few niche hits. Who am I talking about? It's Honorine Blanc. So if you've not seen me before, I'm Claire. I talk all about fragrance on this channel and I'm creating a series of videos profiling the lives and creations of perfumers. I've already featured 7 perfumers in this series of videos, including Francis Kurkdjian, Quentin Biche, Dominique Ropignon, Jerome Epinette, and also Sonia Constant, Natalie Lawson and Louise Turner. So if you are interested in checking out any of those videos, I'll leave them linked in the description box below, alongside a playlist of those videos if you want to catch up on the entire series. Also, if you are interested in the series, then please do consider subscribing so you don't miss any future videos. But today's video is all about Honorine Blanc. So Blanc was born in Lebanon. She was born in the capital in Beirut, and she says that growing up, the first smell that she remembers is the smell of gardenias that grew on her parents' apartment's balcony. She says as well that her first memory of a fragrance was her mum's scent, Shalimar. Blanc describes her childhood as living between flowers and bombs, and she says that actually the political instability in Lebanon led her family to emigrate to Paris when she was just 16. Clearly Lebanon has been quite an unstable country over the years, and actually she may be referring to the Lebanese Civil War, which ran between 1975 and 1990. In Paris, Honorine says that her first fragrance that she ever purchased was Chanel's No. 19. Blanc initially pursued courses in maths, physics and chemistry, but eventually she came to find perfumery was her calling, and she got a place to study at the very prestigious Versailles Perfumery School, ISIPCA. Honorine says of her choice of career that perfumery is a world in which your senses can float, and that's the world that she wanted to inhabit. After perfumery school, Honorine moved to New York. She was invited by her mentors. So her mentors were Sophia Grossman and also Carlos Benaim. And there she stayed. She moved to New York and she never moved back. Reading about Blanc, I couldn't actually see any kind of reference to her first fragrance or first creation. And actually, when I looked in databases, her first creations date from around 2001. And those are a series of fragrances for Avon. And it can be sometimes that when you are starting out, you're a perfumer's assistant, and therefore you're not always credited for your creations, even when you have contributed to the making of a fragrance. But it could also be that perhaps Honorine started out her career making fragrances for things other than perfume. There's a bit of a gap between those first credits in 2001 and her next fragrance credits, which appear around 2006. In the meantime, she moved from her job at International Flavours and Fragrance, IFF, to work for the company Firmenich. She still works for Firmenich today, and she's worked there ever since 2005. In the late 2000s and even the early 2010s, Honorine Blanc was creating lots of different celebrity perfume lines. She made perfumes for pretty much everybody, it seems. She made perfumes for Usher's fragrance line, but she also made Gwen Stefani's music fragrance from her Harajuku Lovers line. She also formulated 2 of Sarah Jessica Parker's fragrances, NYC and NYC Crush, Paris Hilton's Siren, Beyonce's Heat, Rush and also Wild Orchid, Justin Bieber's Someday, Jennifer Lopez's Love and Glamour, Lady Gaga's Fame and also Nicki Minaj's Pink Friday. So a huge variety of fragrances there. I think really at the time, celebrity fragrance was a much bigger market than it perhaps is today. I think that sort of price point has been filled by Middle Eastern perfumery, affordable Middle Eastern perfumery. But back then, celebrity fragrances really had a big chunk of the market and they were much more popular than they are now. So fast forwarding to 2008, Blanc created the Juicy Couture fragrance Viva La Juicy. So Viva La Juicy at the time was bang on trend. It was a really sweet concoction of caramel and vanilla with some berry sweetness, some citrus sweetness too. And it was something that seemed to sell very well. And actually, its flankers seemed to sell even better. So I remember having Viva la Juicy Noir, and also there was Gold Couture released in 2014 that seemed to sell very well. In 2010, Blanc worked with Alberto Marias on a fragrance that was a flanker of opium. So she worked on the Belle d'Opium flanker, and I feel like this flanker was not that successful. It didn't really please original fans of opium. It wasn't striking enough in a way, but it was a move by YSL into a slightly more gentle arena, I think, with that fragrance line. But this really did have elements of opium. It had the incense, but it was softer. It had sandalwood, and it also had some white florals and some pepper. But I think that fragrance is now looked upon fondly. And I think YSL realised that they had to do something with this line. They had to either go back to the core or they had to modernise it. And I think really only 4 years later, they made their decision. In 2011, in combination with Olivier Cresp, Honorine Blanc created Diesel's Loverdose. So Diesel are another YSL brand. And actually, smelling Loverdose these days, you might be taken to another L'Oreal branded fragrance. You might be taken to Black Opium. They do have some similarities. So specifically, there's some anise and some licorice. There's also jasmine, and there's also a really strong vanilla running through the fragrance. Really, if you just added a little drop of coffee to this, you would be pretty close to Black Opium. Of course, YSL decided to relaunch the opium line with the new Black Opium line. They kept the older fragrances, but they wanted to generate a new fragrance line for a new generation. And ultimately, Black Opium was a huge success. So Black Opium was formulated as a collaboration between Olivier Cresp, Nathalie Lawson, and also Marie Salamagne alongside Honorine Blanc. And it sold crazy amounts. It still is selling crazy amounts. It spawned so many flankers. I think there are over 30 flankers now if you count all the special editions and everything. It's something that must have done very, very well for YSL, and it really made Honorine Blanc's name. In 2013, Blanc created a series of fragrances for Estée Lauder. So Estée Lauder were looking to follow some trends. They had noticed the rose oud trend coming in with fragrances like Jo Malone's Velvet Rose and Oud that had already been a little bit successful the year before. And really that whole kind of trend was taking off. If you think about the fragrances that followed the year after, such as Oud Bouquet from Lancôme, you can see where the market is going. This is something that was really taking Western markets in a different direction in the early to mid 2010s. And Estée Lauder wanted a piece of the pie. So they created Amber Mystique alongside Honorine Blanc. And that fragrance is a striking, woody, dark, spicy, red rose, oud, smoky incense kind of fragrance. And it did very well for them. But also, Honorine Blanc that year also formulated some fragrances for their lighter line. So Erin was just starting out in 2013, and they launched initially, I think, with a collection of 5 fragrances. Blanc was tasked with making 5 of them. So she formulated Icat Jasmine, Amber Musk, and also Evening Rose for that line. Evening Rose, a dark rose fragrance with berries, is sadly now discontinued, but the other 2 are still going strong. So Amber Musk, I think a lot of people are familiar with because that was a really popular one because it's got that kind of coconutty feeling in it from the coconut water. But it is a very light wearing fragrance. The other one, Icat Jasmine, is quite a nice airy jasmine with some ylang ylang and also some honeysuckle. It's quite a sweet fragrance. Icat Jasmine sadly became quite controversial because in 2024 the jasmine used in that fragrance was traced to being harvested by children. So children in Egypt were being tasked with harvesting the jasmine used in that fragrance and also a fragrance from L'Oreal. And I do have a video on that if you haven't heard about what went on there and what the company's reactions were to that report from the BBC, I'll link my video up in the cards above and also in the description box in case you do want to find out more. Blanc has gone on to formulate a series of other fragrances for Erin, and she's gone on to produce another 11 fragrances for the brand, including an amber musk flanker most recently, Amber Musk Vanille. In 2014, quite apart from her standout successes with Viva La Juicy Gold Couture and also YSL's Black Opium, she also formulated one of the original releases of the Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen fragrance line, Elizabeth and James Nirvana White. And I feel like this fragrance line was popular when it was released. It was regarded as quite artistic for a celebrity fragrance line. But ultimately, I think it became even more popular when it was discontinued, when people realised just how good these were and started trying these fragrances because they were on discount. And I was one of these people who started trying these fragrances just as they were being discontinued. The one that I still own is Amethyst. I've tried French Grey, I've never tried White, but I was reading about how White is actually described. And a lot of people seem to be comparing it actually to Stella. I was quite surprised by that because there's no rose listed in that fragrance, but it is described as a sparkling peony musk fragrance. So if you have tried Nirvana White, do you think that there is a similarity to Stella McCartney's Stella? I'd love to know whether there is or whether there isn't, because to me, looking at the notes, I can't imagine that there is too much overlap, but I'm interested to know from people who have tried that fragrance. 2018 was another big year for Honorine Blanc, and she created 4 fragrances that were really all successful. So the first of these is perhaps the most surprising. So Cacharel had really been fading in popularity since the early 2000s. It hadn't really had a big hit since Amour Amour, and it was a fragrance line that was looking to launch something new, to go in a different direction. So Cacharel, when you think about their older fragrances, you might think about Eden or Anais, and those are really quite old school, powdery, green florals that are perhaps not very now. So Honorine Blanc really created a very modern vision in fragrance for Cacharel, and Cacharel really went along with this. They put the fragrance Yes I Am in this very striking lipstick shaped bottle, and this fragrance had very distinctive feel to it. People described it as smelling like a raspberry milkshake at the time, and yes, there's raspberry, yes, it's got milky notes, it's a little bit lactonic, it's also got some spices, it's got ginger, cardamom, but it's also just got this very friendly feeling vanilla to it. And it just was a very crowd-pleasing fragrance, but it still stood out because of that kind of milky aspect and because of that slight spice to it. It was really a fragrance that was pushing above its price point. It also had some flankers produced. It seemed to be a success for Cacharel and brought a whole new audience to the brand. The next surprise hit that year was Lancôme's La Nuit Trésor à la Folie. I feel like this flanker is really the one that people still talk about, even though it's been discontinued. The berries and the sweetness and the vanilla of that just seem to make it universally appealing. It seems like it's still something that people would love to see back. The third surprise hit was in collaboration with Natalie Lawson, and this was a fragrance for Jimmy Choo called Viva. Viva was a syrupy plum fragrance with some vanilla and a little bit of a hint of coffee in the dry down. It's a fragrance, again, that some people think is reminiscent of Black Opium. I personally don't see too much similarity there apart from some of the notes, but it was a big seller for Jimmy Choo and did very well. But Blanc's greatest hit that year was a fragrance she made for Kilian. So this is the very complicatedly named Kilian fragrance. I can never remember fully what the name is, but I think it's something like, I don't need a prince by my side to be a princess, I think. So this fragrance came in this differently packaged bottle to indicate that it was from a line that was aimed at a younger audience. It was a slightly lower priced line for Kilian, and I think they've changed the bottle since because they found out that actually the bottle design was not great. In fact, the bottles sometimes leaked, and that was a problem. So yeah, this line has been rebottled and sadly also reformulated. So really this fragrance was the standout of this entire line, alongside perhaps Kissing, also from this particular release. I think really this fragrance is a nice take on something that's sweet, but not so sweet that it becomes off-putting. I think Kilian has a really good grasp of what is the level of sweet beyond which you do not go. And I think this fragrance perfectly captures that. I think the matcha and the ginger really play off against the sweeter notes and make this a really beautifully balanced fragrance. 2019 saw really the release of one of her most successful designer lines to date, and that was Valentino's Donna Born in Roma. So Born in Roma, I think, has been an immense success everywhere, but particularly in the United States. Really, when I recently looked at those top 10 perfume lists from YouTube, it was still doing excellently and charting very highly in those lists. So I think this line in general is just very popular, but especially the original EDP did very well. It's still a very popular fragrance, even 7 years on from its original release. Blanc is still involved in formulating the flankers of that fragrance, so I don't think she did Melancholia, but I think she did do Ivory and also Extra Dose. So 2020 marked a bit of a slowdown in perfumery just in general, but also for Honorine Blanc, and really it marked a change in direction. So weirdly, in this strange world of perfume, Jeremy Fragrance, we all know he was obsessed with Juicy Couture's Viva la Juicy Gold Couture, and he really made that fragrance famous in a way. But because of that, he engaged Honorine Blanc to make him fragrances for his own line, Fragrance One. And she formulated the female marketed fragrances of that line. And everybody seems to compare the night version of that fragrance with Gold Couture. And I think actually Jeremy Fragrance himself sort of really just wanted something that was longer lasting, but along the same lines as that fragrance. And I think that's really what he got. Of course, now it's discontinued. The line, I think, was dissolved in 2022. But I don't think that line did very well. One, because it's Jeremy Fragrance and he's a controversial figure, but also because of the timing of release of those fragrances. Also released in 2020 was a fragrance that Honorine Blanc again formulated for Valentino, and this time it was called Voce Viva. It was associated with a huge advertising campaign that I think featured Lady Gaga, and it just didn't seem to do very well, this fragrance. It was a bit of a flop from the outset. I remember trying it. I remember it being a citrus, quite sharp, but also quite sweet fragrance alongside some white florals. So it's predominantly an orange blossom fragrance, but there's definitely also some jasmine there. It's something that I just think didn't stand out from the crowd too well. 2021 was far more successful for Blanc. So she was associated with Gucci's relaunch of their Flora line. So they discontinued all the old Flora flankers and all the old Flora fragrances, I think perhaps because of perhaps some IFRA regulatory changes, perhaps there were some formulation issues there, and they really relaunched a fragrance that had been formulated by Blanc in 2012, Gorgeous Gardenia, but they changed it from an EDT to an EDP. They put it in a brand new bottle, and they had this really jazzy advertising campaign with Miley Cyrus. They had this beautiful kind of floral print on the bottles. It just looks really bright and happy and joyful. The advertising, it really made me want to try it. And I think that line, you know, as much as it's called Gorgeous Gardenia, there is nothing about that fragrance that makes me think of Gardenia. It's really something that I don't think of florals at all with. It's really just more of a sweet kind of sugary fragrance to me. But yeah, it's done very well for Gucci and it's sold enormously. Of course, there's loads of flankers now to that line, and Blanc has been back and has formulated the intense version of that fragrance. It's a big seller for Gucci and it's done well for them. Another immense success in 2021 was the formulation of Goldfield and Banks' Sunset Hour. So that fragrance is a fruity, sparkly fragrance with a woodiness that comes in the dry down. It's got rosewood smell to me, and there's also a lot of texture here. The texture is really what makes this fragrance distinctive. I'd describe it as something that makes me think of the way cranberry juice tastes in your mouth. You know, that kind of not quite smooth feeling you get with cranberry juice? I get that when I smell Sunset Hour. I think it's a really distinctive fragrance. that I haven't really smelt elsewhere in perfumery. I think it really does stand out. It's definitely also one of the more friendly fragrances, I think, from Honorine Blanc. It's one of the more crowd-pleasing ones, and I can definitely see why this one was a bestseller. So in relation to texture and fragrance, Blanc has highlighted that she really enjoys creating texture in fragrances. She says that texture adds sensuality to fragrances, and it's just as important as the smell. When asked about the notes that she uses in fragrances, Blanc says that she particularly loves musks, and she also likes woods. She says that these two elements to her fragrances are often the common denominators. She says that there's sexiness in a soft but intense fragrance. She says there's nothing more sexy than soft intensity. Moving on to 2023, Blanc actually helped to formulate some of the initial releases for the Liberty fragrance line. I've reviewed that line if you are interested, including some of Honorine Blanc's fragrances. So particularly with the initial launch, she formulated Wild Rosinda, which is a dry, woody rose fragrance. And she also formulated the very striking, syrupy strawberry fragrance with leather, Vine Thief. More recently, she's formulated the resinous, leathery oud fragrance, Here It Rains. In 2024, Honorine Blanc worked again with Alberto Morillas to formulate a fragrance for the Infiniment Coty line. So this line is meant to be the creme de la creme of the Coty fragrance lines. Her contribution was a fragrance called J'ai Trois Amours. So this fragrance is really something that makes me think a little bit of Daisy Wild. If you've tried that fragrance, the kind of banana-y smell alongside some jasmine and some ylang ylang, and also musk. That's J'ai Trois Amours. Also in 2024, Honorine Blanc formulated a fragrance for Parfums de Marly, and this one was called Palatine. So Palatine came in a bright purple bottle, and I think if you were around at the time of the release and you were anxiously awaiting this fragrance, it probably didn't quite live up to the expectations of the colour of the bottle. And I think that one perhaps hasn't done as well for the brand as the other lines released recently. So what has Blanc been up to more recently? Well, she's actually formulated a fragrance called Vanilla 01 for Swiss Arabian, and she's also been producing fragrances for the company Brown Girl Jane. So she's formulated Peach Aura for that brand and also High Tea. And already in 2026, we've had the release of a new La Nuit Trésor flanker, Rouge Drama, and we've also had the release of a new flanker for the Viva La Juicy line, and this one is called Elixir. Blanc says that her fragrance creations hinge around the philosophy of something imperfect and addictive. So what do I think makes a fragrance distinctively hers? Well, I think, her taste and her design has been somewhat muffled by the fact that she's restricted mostly to designer fragrances, celebrity fragrances. I think with those types of creations, there's very little creative freedom sometimes. So I think, if you looked at her creations as a whole, you would perhaps pick out vanilla, you'd perhaps pick out caramel, you'd perhaps pick out Gardenia, actually, interestingly, considering her initial comment about her first scent memory being Gardenia. It does feature quite heavily in her fragrance creations. She does particularly like sparkly fruits. I think that one really stands out. And she also does really like musks. She actually says that her love of musks hinges from her love of sensuality in fragrances. She also says that she frequently incorporates gourmand elements into perfumes to make them addictive. She says that she would describe herself and her tastes in colours. So specifically white because she loves sensuality. Also pink because she says that happiness is very important and she likes to see optimism in her work. Thirdly, she would also choose black because she says that she likes to take risks. She likes something unexpected in fragrance and she loves pleasure and beauty. So please do let me know if you tried any fragrances from Honorine Blanc, if you own any fragrances from her, and also which is your favourite of her creations. Should I have mentioned one in this video that I've missed out somehow? Please do let me know down below, and also thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, then please do press the like button, and please also consider subscribing if you haven't done already so you don't miss future videos in this Perfumer profile series, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!